What the hell is this? I've been sending $2,000 every single month for the past 4 years to help my granddaughter Camilla with her lupus treatment. The voice boomed across the dining table, sharp and furious. It belonged to my grandmother Clara, who had been unusually quiet all evening, her fingers gripping the napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. I'm Camilla Harrison. That night, I had finally agreed to come back to my parents' house in the Chicago suburbs for a family reunion dinner after years of staying away. The table was loaded with food, everyone was laughing and chatting like everything was perfect, and then, out of nowhere, Grandma exploded. My heart stopped. I stared at her, barely able to speak. "Grandma, what are you talking about?" Every face around the table went pale. My parents froze mid-sentence. My younger brother Finn looked like he'd seen a ghost. Even the man sitting quietly at the end of the table, Grandma's longtime financial advisor and attorney, Mr. Grant Pierce, kept his expression stone cold, like he already knew exactly what was coming. The room went dead silent. No one touched their food. No one dared to breathe too loud. And that was just the beginning of the night everything fell apart. If you want to know how my own family betrayed me for years and what happened when the truth finally came out, stay until the end, because it gets much worse. Like this video if you're already hooked, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next, and comment below, have you ever been betrayed by someone close to you? Let's get into the story. Right after my question, every pair of eyes turned toward Grandma, and I suddenly realized she had been acting strange ever since she walked through the door. To understand why that moment hit me so hard, I have to take you back 4 years to the winter everything in my life fell apart. I was 24 then, and my lupus had flared up worse than ever. The fatigue was crushing, the joint pain constant, and the medical bills were piling up fast. Specialist visits, blood tests, and the medications I needed to keep the disease from attacking my organs cost thousands every month. I was still living at home, trying to hold down a basic office job while managing the illness. At first, my parents seemed concerned. My father, Earl Harrison, would ask how I was feeling when he got home from work. My mother, Wanda Harrison, made sure I had soup or tea when the pain got bad. But as the bills kept coming, their attitude shifted. One evening, after another hospital visit left me with a huge copay I couldn't cover, I sat them down and asked for help just until I could get back on my feet. Earl looked uncomfortable. Wanda sighed and said they were already stretched thin. They told me I was an adult now and needed to figure it out on my own. A week later, things got worse. I came home from a late shift to find my bags packed and waiting by the door. Earl said it plainly, they couldn't afford to keep supporting me with my condition. Wanda added that it wasn't fair to my younger brother Finn, who was still in high school and needed stability for college. They told me I had to leave that night. It was freezing outside, the kind of Chicago cold that cuts straight through your coat. I stood on the porch with nowhere to go, tears freezing on my face. I called my best friend Sarah, and she came right away. She let me crash on her couch for a few weeks while I scraped together enough for a tiny apartment on the edge of the city. Those first months alone were brutal. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything ate into what little I earned. When the lupus flared again, I had to choose between medicine and food some weeks. I picked up extra shifts wherever I could, but the exhaustion made everything harder. There were nights I could barely stand, but I kept going because I had no choice. Slowly, I started teaching myself graphic design online during the rare hours I wasn't working or sleeping. I practiced on a second-hand laptop Sarah helped me buy. Little by little, I built a portfolio and took on freelance jobs. The money was inconsistent at first, but it grew. 3 years ago, I officially started my own small design firm, just me working from home. Clients trickled in, then steadied. For the first time, I could cover my treatments without panic. I wasn't rich, but I was independent, and that felt like a victory no one could take away. I hadn't been back to my parents' house since the night they put me out. I kept contact, minimal short replies to holiday texts, nothing more. Finn reached out occasionally, but it always felt surface level. Then a few weeks before Christmas, Grandma called out of the blue. Her voice was warm, as always, asking how I was doing and saying she missed me. She told me the family was planning a big reunion dinner at my parents' place and insisted I come. It's been too long, Camilla. Please, for me. I hesitated, but I've always had a soft spot for her. She's the one person in the family who never made me feel like a burden, so I said yes. The night of the reunion, I drove over with a knot in my stomach. The house looked different, new siding holiday lights strung perfectly, that shiny SUV parked out front. Inside, the table was set like something out of a magazine, prime rib, fancy sides, expensive wine. Dad greeted me with a big hug that felt forced. Mom smiled too wide and kept touching my arm like she was proving something. Finn, now in college, talked nonstop about his classes and new friends, glancing at Grandma every few minutes to see if she was impressed. They all fawned over Grandma the whole evening, refilling her glass before she asked, laughing loud at her stories, bringing out dessert like it was a celebration just for her being there. It was over the top even for them. I sat quietly, picking at my food, wondering why I had come. And then, Grandma dropped the bomb that changed everything. Grandma looked at the folder for a long moment, then lifted her eyes with an expression of pain I had never seen on her face before. The evening had started with small talk that almost felt normal. Grandma had turned to me early on, her voice soft and caring. "How have you been feeling, Camilla? Is the lupus under control these days?" I managed a quiet answer, telling her the flares were less frequent and that I was handling things better. She smiled warmly, reaching across to pat my hand. "That's my girl. You've always been strong." For a brief second, the tension in the room eased, and I let myself believe the night might pass without incident. But Grandma's attention shifted. She straightened in her chair, her gaze moving slowly between Dad and Mom. The warmth in her voice faded, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. "Since we're talking about Camilla's health," she said evenly, "I've been sending $2,000 every month for the past 4 years. That money was meant strictly for her lupus treatment, medications, appointments, whatever she needed to stay on top of the disease." The words landed like stones. Dad's face tightened. He set his glass down carefully and tried for a light chuckle. "Mom, you really don't need to concern yourself with the details. Camilla sometimes struggles with managing finances, so Wanda and I have been handling it responsibly, making sure everything goes toward her care." Mom nodded quickly, her voice pitched with practiced worry. "Yes, we've always prioritized her well-being. You know we'd never let anything happen to her." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Their eyes flicked to me, expectant, as if I would back them up or stay silent. The old habit of avoiding conflict tugged at me, but this time I couldn't. My voice came out barely above a whisper, trembling. "I've never received a single dollar of that money." Grandma's head snapped toward me. Her eyes widened, searching my face for any sign I was mistaken or exaggerating. When she saw I wasn't, the color drained from her cheeks. Pain flashed across her features, raw, unguarded hurt that made my chest ache in a different way. The table went completely still. Finn stared at his plate. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. Mom's hand fluttered to her necklace, twisting it nervously. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She turned deliberately to the man at the end of the table. Mr. Grant Pierce had been quiet all night, observing everything with professional detachment. He had handled Grandma's financial affairs for over a decade, trusts, investments, transfers, ever since she retired from her business. She gave him one small nod. Mr. Pierce reached into his briefcase without hurry. He pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the tablecloth with a deliberate thud. Then he opened it, spreading several pages so everyone could see. "These are the full records," he said in a calm, factual tone. "Every monthly transfer from your personal account to Wanda Harrison's account. $2,000 on the 3rd of each month, 48 consecutive times." He pointed to the highlighted lines. The amounts were exact. And on every single transaction, the memo field read the same: support for Camilla Harrison's lupus treatment. Then he flipped to the next set of statements: Mom's bank records. The deposits appeared clearly timed perfectly. But after each one, there was no corresponding outgoing transfer to me. No deposits into my account. No payments labeled for my care. Nothing. $96,000 in total meant for my survival vanished into their lives without a trace leading to me. Dad leaned forward slightly as if to object, but the words seemed stuck. His face had gone from pale to flushed. Mom's eyes filled with tears that didn't fall, her lips pressed tight. They exchanged a quick glance, panic passing between them. Grandma studied the pages in silence. Her finger traced one line then another as if confirming the numbers herself. The hurt in her eyes deepened with every entry she read. This wasn't just about the money. It was the realization that her own daughter and son-in-law had used her love for me as a tool for years. I sat frozen, staring at the proof. All those months I had rationed medication, skipped follow-ups to save money, worked through pain that left me bedridden for days. It all played back in my mind. While I fought alone, they had been receiving help meant for me, and never passed it on. The silence stretched heavy and oppressive. No one offered an explanation. No one tried to justify it. The evidence was undeniable, printed in black and white. Grandma finally looked up from the papers. Her eyes were moist, but her expression had hardened into something resolute. Grandma finally looked up from the papers. Her eyes were moist, but her expression had hardened into something resolute. She gave no one a chance to interrupt or deflect. With the same composed tone she used in boardrooms years ago, she addressed Dad and Mom head-on. "Now that we've seen where the money didn't go," she said coolly, "let's examine where it did." Mr. Pierce, sensing her intent, opened his briefcase once more and arranged a fresh set of documents beside the bank statements. Grandma acknowledged them with a slight tilt of her head and proceeded. "Two family vacations to Europe come to mind first," she began. The initial trip to Italy, round-trip flights for 4 private guided tours in Rome, Florence, and Venice, plus stays at 4- and 5-star hotels along the Amalfi Coast. Booked and fully paid shortly after one of my transfers arrived. The corresponding records appeared: airline confirmations, tour, operator receipts, hotel folios, all charged to the same account that received her monthly deposits. The timing was exact down to the day. Grandma continued without inflection. The second trip the following year to France. Flights again, a week in Paris with museum passes and river cruises, followed by several days touring castles in the Loire Valley and wine tastings in Bordeaux. Again, reservations and payments finalized within days of another deposit clearing. More pages slid forward, additional itineraries, restaurant charges at renowned spots, and luxury train tickets between cities. The pattern held firm. Then there's the extensive smart home installation completed roughly 18 months ago, she went on. A whole house system including exterior security cameras, with night vision, interior motion sensors, smart thermostats in every room, voice-controlled lighting, automated shades, and integrated audio throughout. The project totaled just over $22,000, with the bulk of payments initiated right after consecutive monthly transfers. Contractor proposals, itemized bills, and installment records from a certified smart home specialist confirmed every detail, timestamps aligning perfectly. And finally, Grandma said, motioning toward the large window overlooking the driveway, the SUV parked out front. "Acquired last spring." The down payment was significant enough to require a sizable withdrawal, the exact amount drawn the same week one of my transfers posted. Dealership documents followed: purchase agreement, vehicle specification sheet, financing approval, and the bank transaction showing the large outgoing sum that made the deal possible. Dad's face flushed deeper, his breathing uneven. He kept opening his mouth, as if to explain, then closing it again. Mom sat frozen, fingers twisted together so tightly her nails left marks. Finn attempted to lighten the mood, his voice higher than usual. "Grandma, those things are just part of normal life. We needed a safer car for longer drives." The trips were rare chances to make memories as a family. Grandma regarded him steadily. "Memories built on money I sent specifically to cover your sister's lupus medications and specialist visits." The question was soft, but it landed heavily. This wasn't occasional spending or rewards, Finn. This was deliberate, ongoing deception every single month without exception. The dining room felt increasingly confined. The carefully prepared meal roast with all the trimmings, elaborate sides, decadent desserts remained largely untouched, growing cold. Festive lights outside blinked in cheerful patterns, completely at odds with the grim atmosphere inside. Grandma rested her hands on the table, palms down. "I will not permit this to be dismissed or minimized. What has happened here is not a private family issue. It is calculated fraud, and I intend to see it addressed properly." The statement carried absolute finality. Dad tried once more to speak, managing only a strained sound before stopping. Mom's shoulders began to shake slightly, silent tears finally spilling. Finn stared fixedly at his lap. All earlier confidence evaporated. The reunion dinner simply disintegrated. No one suggested moving to the living room or serving coffee. Grandma stood first, adjusting her scarf and stepping back from her chair with quiet dignity. Mr. Pierce methodically collected every page, returning them to his case. I rose without a word, my movements automatic. I avoided any glance toward Dad, Mom, or Finn as I headed for the front door. The sharp Chicago winter night greeted us immediately upon exiting, wind-whipping light snow across the porch. Our shoes crunched on the thin layer of ice covering the walkway to Grandma's car. One weekend afternoon, I drove to Grandma's house, my mind still heavy from that dinner. The route took me north along the lakefront, past bare trees and patches of lingering snow, until her property came into view. The house stood comfortably against the Lake Michigan shoreline, its windows reflecting the dull winter light. I parked in the circular drive and walked up the steps. Grandma opened the door immediately, as if she had been watching for me, and enveloped me in a hug that felt like an apology and a promise all at once. She led me to the sitting room with its wide view of the water. Mr. Pierce was already there, seated near the fireplace with a closed folder on the side table. Grandma poured coffee for me, herbal tea for herself, and sat down facing me. "I've been carrying this longer than you know," she said softly. "For months, I've reviewed my bank statements every time they arrived. It's something I've always done, keeping an eye on outflows. I saw the transfers leaving my account on schedule, but I never heard from you about how they were making a difference." That silence started to bother me. She stared out at the lake for a moment. The moment everything crystallized was a phone call a few months back. "Your Aunt Gina, Mom's younger sister, called just to talk. She had dropped by your parents' house the week before and couldn't stop commenting on how much nicer everything looked. Updated kitchen, high-end electronics, all over that impressive new car. She was genuinely curious how they swung it, since Earl's income hasn't gone up significantly in years." Gina wasn't suspicious, she was simply sharing what she saw, happy for her sister. Grandma turned her gaze back to me, but her words matched the questions I already had. I reached out to Mr. Pierce the next day and asked him to look deeper quietly. We pulled additional records, matched dates, gathered supporting documents. By the time I proposed the reunion dinner, we had a clear picture of what was happening. Mr. Pierce inclined his head slightly but remained silent, letting Grandma finish. Knowing she had been piecing this together alone for so long added another layer to the ache. She hadn't confronted them impulsively. She had been shielding me while confirming the truth. Grandma reached across and took my hand. "Now I need to hear from you. How have you truly managed these past years?" I kept my summary brief, the memories still sharp. "The early days were the toughest. I had no safety net, so every expense felt overwhelming. I worked through the worst flares, took whatever shifts were available. Nights I studied graphic design tutorials online, building skills on a used laptop. I created a portfolio from scratch, applied for freelance work. Jobs came slowly at first, then more regularly. A few years ago, I registered my own small design company. It's grown enough that clients are steady, now increasing quarter by quarter. I cover my medical needs without constant fear. Grandma listened without interrupting, her eyes glistening. She squeezed my hand tighter. You accomplished all that on your own. I'm prouder than I can say, and more sorry than you'll ever know that I didn't see it sooner. The emotion in the room was palpable. Then Grandma's expression changed, sorrow, giving way to firm resolve. She released my hand and looked at Mr. Pierce. We're ready. Put together the complete case: fraud, embezzlement, misappropriation of funds. File as soon as possible. Mr. Pierce met her eyes. I'll begin drafting immediately. We'll have everything prepared this week. Grandma turned back to me, her voice steady. This will be handled properly, Camilla. They won't escape the consequences. After months of tense waiting, the day of the final court ruling finally arrived. It started about 2 months after Grandma's decision to file. My phone began ringing one morning with Mom's number on the screen. I let it go to voicemail the first few times, but she kept calling. When I finally answered, her voice was thick with tears. Camilla, please, she sobbed. Talk to your grandmother. Beg her to drop the lawsuit. We're so sorry. We never meant for things to go this far. The family is falling apart. We're struggling badly now. Please, for all our sakes. I listened in silence for a moment. The pleading felt familiar, but this time it was for their own survival. You had years to think about this, I said quietly. It's too late. I ended the call. The messages came next. Dad sent long texts blaming me for tearing the family apart, calling me ungrateful after everything they had done raising me. Finn's were shorter, angrier, accusing me of being heartless for suing my own parents and brother. He wrote that I was destroying his future too. I replied once to Mom's follow-up voicemail. This isn't about revenge. It's about what was taken from me. Then I blocked all 3 numbers. The silence that followed was a relief I hadn't expected. The legal process dragged on longer than anyone hoped. Preliminary hearings stretched over weeks, then months. Mr. Pierce handled everything with steady precision, filing motions responding to delays from the defense. Grandma kept me updated, but I stayed out of most details, focusing on my work instead. Finally, the trial date arrived at the courthouse in downtown Chicago. The room was formal, high ceilings echoing every footstep. Grandma sat beside me, calm and composed. Mr. Pierce was at the plaintiff's table, folders organized in front of him. Dad and Mom were across the aisle, looking worn. Dad's suit hung looser than I remembered. Mom kept her eyes down, clutching a tissue. Finn sat behind them, arms crossed, staring ahead. Mr. Pierce presented the case methodically. He started with the bank records: 48 consecutive transfers totaling $96,000 over 4 years. Each memo line identical support for my lupus treatment. Then came the spending evidence. He displayed enlarged statements showing deposits into Mom's account, followed almost immediately by large outflows, payments for European vacations, the smart home installation, the SUV purchase. Dates matched exactly, no gaps. The defense attorney argued weakly that the money was simply intra-family assistance with no malicious intent. This was parental support, he claimed. No formal agreement existed because trust was assumed. Mr. Pierce countered smoothly, pointing out the consistent memos designating the funds for my medical care, the complete absence of any transfers to me, and the pattern of luxury expenditures timed perfectly with receipts. The judge listened without interruption, reviewing the exhibits carefully. When both sides rested, he took only a short recess before returning with the verdict. He addressed Dad and Mom directly. The evidence shows a clear and sustained misappropriation of funds intended for the plaintiff's medical needs. The defendants received and spent $96,000 over 4 years without ever directing any portion to its stated purpose. He paused, then continued. Therefore, Earl Harrison and Wanda Harrison are ordered to repay the full amount of $96,000, plus compounded interest for the period of delay. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. The ruling was final. No appeals likely to succeed on such clear documentation. Dad slumped forward. Mom finally broke down quietly. Finn looked stunned as if the reality had just hit. Grandma placed her hand on my arm, steady and warm. When everything finally settled, I realized I had truly turned the page to a new chapter. Months had passed since the court order. One ordinary morning, I checked my bank app and saw the full amount deposited, $96,000 plus the accrued interest. It was real official. The weight of those stolen years returned to me. I didn't spend it recklessly. I thought carefully about what would build the most security. A portion went toward expanding my graphic design company, better software, a dedicated office space in a small shared studio, and marketing to attract larger clients. Another chunk built an emergency fund specifically for medical needs, enough to cover flares without stress. The rest stayed invested conservatively, growing quietly for the future I was now free to plan. I made one final decision early on: complete separation. I changed my phone number, updated privacy settings everywhere, and let Grandma know I was done. No more responses, no explanations needed. Earl, Wanda, and Finn became part of a past I no longer carried. Grandma and I met for coffee every few weeks. She never pushed for details about them, but one afternoon over tea at her lake house, she shared what she had heard through distant channels. They had to sell the house to cover the judgment, she said simply. Moved into a small apartment across town. Earl's credit took a serious hit, making job searches harder. He's been turned down for positions he would have gotten easily before. Wanda keeps mostly to herself, now rarely goes out. Finn dropped out of college midway through the semester. No money for tuition, and the stress at home didn't help. She spoke factually without satisfaction or pity. I listened, nodding. The news didn't bring triumph or vindication. It didn't spark joy at their struggle. Instead, it brought a quiet sense of relief, like closing a book I had been forced to keep open for too long. I felt lighter. The constant background hum of old anger faded. Nights were easier. I slept without replaying arguments in my head. My focus sharpened on the present: new projects, steady clients, managing my health proactively. Looking back, I understood something clearer than ever. Family isn't only about shared blood, it's about who shows up consistently, who cares without conditions. Grandma had proven that. Sarah had too, all those years ago. The real strength came from within, from learning I could rely on myself when no one else would. That independence became my foundation, something solid no betrayal could shake again. I no longer looked backward. The future was mine to shape, peaceful and open.